Hello, welcome to another episode of Passing Notes. Today I have the fabulous Shenoah Groves with me. She has decades of experience creating owner finance notes, mortgage notes, investing in real estate, and also teaching new real estate investors how to get started. She's a wealth of knowledge, and it is an absolute privilege to have her here today. Shenoah, why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, and how you get started, what, made you passionate about real estate?
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. And thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on and speak to your fans, your listeners, et cetera. So I've been investing in real estate since 2003. I went full time in 2004. Before that, I was in financial planning and analysis. So I have an undergraduate degree from the University of Texas at Austin and an MBA from Rice University. So homegrown in Texas here. And my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents actually all had rental property. In fact, my mom still has over 12 doors to this day. So real estate is a little bit in my DNA. But I decided when I was kind of a younger woman that I was going to show them how wealth got made. And I went into corporate America, and I very quickly realized that, no, I need to go back to real estate because that's where the real money's at, right? So I started investing in 2003, left my full-time corporate America job in 2004, and I've been investing for the last 16 and a half years, have not looked back. I have not updated my resume since 2003. I've not had to take a paycheck from anyone else since 2004. And I get a lot of freedom from what I do in real estate investing, as well as obviously a lot of opportunity to create income, create wealth. And as part of my journey, when I first started investing, I joined the local real estate investor association. And that's where I got my new tribe, right? That's where I got my knowledge. That's where I got my contacts. That's where I got my contracts. That's where I got my contractors. And as a result, I would not be as successful as I am today had I not joined that first association. So now, in addition to all the investing that I do in single family, commercial, I still run the local real estate and investor association. We have meetings in Austin, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. And it's because those are all the places we invest here in Texas. And we do the same thing that the Investing Association did for me when I first got started, which is give a hand up to new investors as they're trying to maybe transition away from their full-time job into real estate, or even do it full-time, do it part-time, do it actively, do it passively. So we help a lot of investors as they're getting started figure out how to maximize their plan based on their knowledge, based on the different assets that they're working with, based on their experience, and also based on the goals that they have. So that's a little bit about my background.
Which I absolutely love. I mean, you and I went full-time around the same time. I went full-time January 2005. Haven't looked back. Hopefully I'm not going to. And again, yes, real estate investing has evolved from rental properties to owner financing, originating notes, to buying and selling notes of all kinds, but for me, primarily performers. So your owner finance background, because really I knew so much of you and your husband just from hearing, if you need to get information about setting up owner finance deals, this is who you need to talk to. Call up Phil and Shenoah, and they can help you learn more about owner financing. So when did you start getting into owner financing?
Well, that's interesting because when we first got started, where we were in the market, and for us, we are very much students of the market. So we're responding with different strategies that work based on what the market's telling us, whether the market's up, down, sideways, that sort of, or right now, even an upside down market. So when we first started investing here in Austin, it was right after Dell had let go, several hundreds of employees every single day. So at that stage in our investing, we were doing a lot of short sales, right? People who had put very little money down, didn't have any savings to be able to cover the closing costs. Values were going down after kind of that dot-com bust period,
and
for several years after that.
I remember this, but this was what? This was This
was 2003, 2004. Yeah. So, and what we found is because we here in Austin had built up so much inventory, there were a lot of opportunities for doing short sales. And, another colleague, a mutual colleague of ours, said, hey, guys, why don't you look at buying these properties subject to and then wrapping them out? And it's like, well, at first, it was very interesting because we're wrapping not to other investors, we were wrapping to end buyers who maybe couldn't get a loan. So part of our strategy is we would call it, we would sell unsellable houses to unloanable buyers.
Right.
So we would take sellers who had little, no, or negative equity, and we would match them with buyers who maybe had a hard time getting a loan because of where we were in the marketplace. And it was a beautiful connection. And as the market kind of changed and we were in the Great Recession for a while, then at that point, it very much, when banks stopped doing their job of lending, that's when I feel like we stepped in and said, all right, well, we're going to bridge the gap between these sellers who can't sell and these buyers who can't buy. And we're going to use our tribal knowledge, right, to be able to help people achieve the things that they want, right? The sellers don't want to go to foreclosure.
And it's still coming back.
The buyers want a house, but they can't get a loan.
Right, absolutely. And it's still coming back. So even though it started back, yes, you started seeing this in 2003, 2004 in Austin, which maybe not in the rest of Texas,
right,
but in your local market, that's what happened. Then it expands. I mean, fast forward 2008, 2009, 2010, that's about all we were doing anywhere in Texas was, I was picking up 2009, 2010, I was picking up only subject twos and wrapping them,
right,
and getting them performing. And those have all, paid off over the years, which are phenomenal. They might be small a little bit to get started, but the equity that you can achieve, 5 years later is, it's pretty good. So that is it's phenomenal.
There are riches and niches, and you are very much in a niche, and so am I. And there is a lot to be said for solving problems that are kind of unsolvable by the larger market forces that are not ready to integrate some of these different ideas that some people with some of this tribal knowledge and know-how like us, that we have.
Well, let's talk about some specifics, because while acquiring properties subject to and wrapping them is a phenomenal strategy, especially if you don't have the credit, the expertise. You can't, the property may be underwater at that time just for what's going on. And depending on the financial market, you might have to take down that property. Okay, and then we're going to take a certain percentage down. And maybe you've got your principal balances in line and you're taking a spread on the interest rate, for your profit. But doing that, are there any pitfalls that you would tell people, who are looking, because I get questions all the day, every day, how do I get started in this? How do I buy a property subject to? But really it's getting into it, because when you're talking to them about subject to properties, you tell them, well, in the next 12 to 24 months, the buyer could refinance, or, you'll get this off your credit eventually. But the reality is sometimes it takes a couple of years past that, and you're 3, 4, 5 years into it. And then you've got very angry original sellers to find out they have this loan on there. What's your experience with that? What have you seen?
Well, there are two things I want to say. First off, what I love about buying subject to and creating these wraparound mortgages is, as a real estate investor, and this, right? There's never enough money, right? It's like, you never.
Money is finite. That is my ultimate saying at basically every class I use.
Yeah.
How do you finance this stuff? Because I don't care if you're a multimillionaire.
That's right.
If you're borrowing from a multimillionaire, because all of a sudden, you've got this guy and you think he's a blank checkbook. And then he decides to go and buy a sports team. And you don't have anybody to lend to or anybody to borrow from anymore. Again, money is finite. So what are you doing to, one, borrow that money, but then get that money back to your lender as fast as possible to be able to borrow it again?
Right. So using, the subject to strategy wraparound mortgage, it's a great way as a real estate investor to make a dollar holler, right? So I'm taking over mortgages that, are $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 mortgages that I don't have to bring any of my own credit to the table. Usually the only money that I'm bringing to the table is the reinstatement and the closing costs, and then whatever I'm giving to the seller, right? So for me, it's been a great way to extend my dollar, right? Make it holler, and be able to acquire more properties as a real estate investor.
Of course,
now, on the other end of that,
while you are putting that money down, right? You're like, oh, I might have closing costs or this, and it's going to require some capital. You have already, in the interim of closing on this, found your back end buyer who's going to be bringing money in. So it actually might be a net positive.
Oh, 100%. And, it's funny because you mentioned well, what happens if that end buyer doesn't get refinanced in time? It's like, I have to kind of remind the sellers from time to time who are like, hugging you like at the time of closing, like you saved my life, you saved me from going to foreclosure, to in some cases, because we've been doing it long enough, 3 years later saying, I want this off my credit. It's like, well,
you go from being
I want to buy another house. And it's like, well, by the way, the only reason, let's just go back in the time machine. The only reason that you can actually do this is because, yeah, you're right. You're welcome. It's pronounced you're welcome, right? That's what you need to be saying when you're talking to me, because without me saving the property from going to auction and making the payments on time each and every month, you would not be in a position to, purchase that next property.
Right. 3 years has gone by. You've got another 4 years until you look forward to buying that property.
Yeah. So, and it's what's interesting too is people forget that so much about, buying a property and qualifying for a loan is, there's a little bit of voodoo science in there, right? So it's not just about that debt that you have on that performing asset, right? That's actually what has brought your credit score up so high that you could, right? But there's so many other aspects of getting a loan, your income, how long you've been at your job, how long you've been in that industry, what your savings is, what your credit is. So, I mean, I have had a seller come back and say, well, I can't get a loan because of this. It's like, no, you can't get a loan. And sometimes I get some of their mail, right? It's like, no, you can't get a loan because you owe this debtor like $5,000. So why don't you go pay that one off first before you call me about, and I'm not trying to be, I know that comes off kind of jerky. It comes off harsh, but that is exactly what it is. And again, without some of the tribal knowledge that we use to be able to stop a property from going to foreclosure, sometimes at the last minute because the seller has burned up everything and even burned up all of their equity, right? So, if it would have gone down the way that they would have been on their path, it would have gone to foreclosure. So it would be 7 years at least before they could purchase a property. So with what we do, we get them back on track much sooner to be able to kind of graduate to that next house. And what I find is a lot of times the sellers that I'm working with, I don't know about you, it's like, man, that buying a house thing didn't quite work out for me super well. So I'm going to kind of step back from that and look at some other alternatives while I just kind of get my life back together.
Well, and I've done enough of the subject to loans where, I had some that were perfect and they went really, really well. And I've had some that were horrible. And I mean, yeah, the same person who's hugging you going, I can't believe you saved me from this, is I guarantee it 2 or 3 years down the road going to be screaming at you on the phone, telling you what a horrible person you are. And in some cases with me, I didn't even meet the people. I had nothing to do with any of, I took their mortgage over subject to, but I'm like, well, this came from somebody else. I don't even know who you are. I'm terribly sorry. So yeah, it's bad, which is why I always, subject to mortgages, there's a risk involved, especially for the people who don't know what they're doing and they get out there and they don't get their power of attorney. Number one, most important thing, so they can talk to it. But I had one nightmare of a subject to that we bought it, and every January he learned that the escrow refund was going to be coming in. So he would call in and change his mailing address to wherever he was at. And then they would send him the check, and then I would have to cover it. It was every year, and so for anybody out there looking to do subject to that, those are ones, wraps as well, but not as much especially if you're in charge of that loan. But subject to wraps specifically, I'm always like, sell those. Season them, 12, 24 months, sell them. One, you're going to have a really happy customer that you bought the property from, and you're not going to have to get those awful phone calls. And two, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. I had a call from an investor, and she goes, well, the borrower died in the house, and it was a subject to loan. And she basically, either she was going to lose it, right? She was going to lose her underlying lien portion and lose this house if she didn't keep paying it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, she wasn't allowed to do anything for 24 months on the guy who had died and his heirs. So it was a really, really difficult situation for this investor. And I was like, well, you got to weigh the pros and the cons. You want to keep this thing?
In that particular situation, I don't know all the details, but I mean, if she was the note holder, she wasn't receiving payments, she could have just foreclosed on the note, right?
She couldn't, because it was in probate. She couldn't even call them.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. When they're in probate, because they need time.
Go to foreclosure when
they're in probate, or when they shouldn't be.
No, I mean, there's nothing in the deed of trust, for example, that says like, if somebody dies, we're going to do a little timeout for 2 years while you figure this out. No, banks are like, no, somebody dies, don't, they're a little more heartless, right? Don't care. If somebody's still making the payments, then we'll hang out with you. But if no one's making the payments, then we're going to foreclose on it. But, one of the things that I do to make sure that my sellers feel good when I'm taking over a property subject to, and specifically when I'm wrapping it, and I've got like a whole list of objections and all of the different things that I use to overcome those objections is, kind of my last one is this. It's like, I don't know whether you're a religious person or not, but whether you are or whether you are not, every single night after I buy your house, reinstate your loan, fix it up, and wrap it to somebody else, every single night you're going to make a little prayer to God that says, man, I hope that Shenoah Grove lady or whoever she sold that property to gets hit by a bus. Because think about it, because then if she stops paying, then I get to foreclose on her, because for us, when we do it, and I think you do too, create a brand new note and a brand new note and a brand new deed of trust. So this wraparound mortgage that allows the original seller to be able to foreclose. So if I stop making payments,
so you actually encourage them going, hey, you win the lottery if I actually die, because you get to foreclose on me and take this property back.
That I fixed up, right? That I, reinstated. And do you think you're going to foreclose on me a little faster than your bank tried to foreclose on you? And I was like, yeah, you bet your butt you will.
That's a great,
like you winning the lottery. So whether you're a religious person or not, that's a prayer you're going to say every night. And then it's like the greed, kicks in. It's like, where do I sign again? Where do we do this? So,
and just letting them know that they have recourse and they can go, okay, you're not making your payments, I'm going to take this back.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the advantages to them, and especially like, and I think we can both, speak from experience in this market. It's like, and, the bonus on top of that is the property, every year is going to be going up in value somewhere between 5 and 10%. So it's going to be, even more beneficial for you, if I do something, untoward, or if I just do something wrong, or the buyer does something wrong. So there is recourse. I mean, you are now the bank, and you got a lot of power in that position. So once they kind of hear that and understand what kind of power and leverage they actually have, then usually, and the greed kicks in, usually it's like, okay, where do I do this again? So, and then, for me, and I know for you too, it's like, I've got a great attorney. I know you do as well. My attorney spends a lot of time just kind of going through like a full disclosure. Do you understand what we're doing here? And we wouldn't do it any other way. And I know you wouldn't either, because we want to make sure people understand this transaction fully. And that's important to me, to kind of stay in integrity as a, person, as a real estate investor, and
well, what I tell real estate investors, especially new ones getting started, always use professionals do not, I know you're trying to save, some money, but who you're trying to save money is the person buying this property. And they're going to feel a lot better about it if you're using professionals and they know that they're legally protected.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just doing things right.
People, so I bet I get the same question that you get, which is, well, how exactly do I do this? And how exactly does the paperwork work? And it's so funny that happens in real estate investing, but it's like if somebody's going out and buying, a car, do they have the conversation with the salesperson like, hey, can you explain how a combustible engine works? Because I really want to get in there and understand that, right? When you're getting insurance, you go with your and say, I really want to dig into, how you're writing the policy, right? It's like, I tell investors like, hey, just like when you're buying a car, just like you're getting insurance, just like when you got the loan on your own home from Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America, you didn't say like, hey, lender, I want you to tell me everything that you do. No, it's like you just trusted the professionals to put it together. And what do? They did exactly that, right?
And did a great job.
The business of a real estate investor is to find more deals, find more opportunities, and then hand over those minimum wage activities, if you will, to the other people who specialize in that. Like, I don't need a law degree, just like I don't need to be an HVAC tech, and I don't need to be an electrician, and I don't need to be all of these different things in order to be a real estate professional to be able to make money. I'm focused on those things, and so are you, right? Riches and niches that are the
staying in our lane. Yeah, staying in our lane and doing what we are good at, and I also get back to it, if you read enough books out there, but one of the most important things is you want to work on your business, not in your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're doing like menial tasks that could be farmed out to a virtual assistant or an assistant of any kind, you're wasting yourself, you're wasting your hours in your day. And that gets back to all of this, but you absolutely have to hire professionals. And, I get questions on, just writing a subject to contract. And I'm like, surprisingly, it's the same contract that you would use for anything. And I'm like, you don't have to go pay somebody, thousands of dollars to do it. Download it off the trek.gov website or whatever your state website is. And you can get an official contract and, you're buying it subject to the existing financing. So going, looking forward into Austin, have you started to see a slowing of appreciation, or are you all still booming? Because Austin for the last decade has just, it's like it doubles in price every year.
Yeah, average price in Austin was up 13.5% year over year for the July 2020 versus July 2019 in the middle of all of this, right?
Right.
Average price in Austin and the Austin area, $450,000. I mean, it's like, no problems with price here. Still doing fantastic. So, that's why for us,
do you see and
right? Our sub twos, like, do we wrap them out? Yeah, we'll wrap out the ones that don't have a lot of equity. We'll wrap out the ones that are in the parts of Central Texas that aren't going up in value as much as, some of the parts that we invest in.
But you're holding the ones for rentals.
It's like I always say, like, we have the Bluebell ice cream investing philosophy. They say we eat all we can and we sell the rest. It's like, I want to keep every single property that I can, and I want to sell all the ones that just aren't good enough, right? But everything I can keep, I'm going to keep, because I know that, the people who make money, the people who build wealth, the ones that can hold on to properties in between market cycles, right? And, you and I have been investing for about the same amount of time. And it's like, we've seen how, even, Texas in general and even our individual markets have gone up so significantly in value. It is a blessing to be a real estate investor. So
it absolutely is, and I'm looking more, are you shifting, because I know you deal with multiple strategies, right? And I mean, and that's what every good investor does, is that you never want to throw a lead in the trash. So you've got a lead that comes in, where are you going to send it? And it might not be something that you're good at, but you're going to refer it out, So if I get something and it's an obvious short sale play, I'm going to send it to my short sale girl,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The investor who just can knock short sales out of the park. I'm going to send it to her, and, I will take, whatever small fee comes my way for that, and I'm going to keep the rest, that I personally can work out.
Yeah,
Are you shifting?
I send a lot of stuff your way just because you have a very specific niche. And it's a niche that I plan, but only like this much. And it is a niche that, you are the expert in. So I'm constantly sending people your way to, because I know you have a very specialized product, a specialized offering, you have specialized knowledge, you've got a specialized network, and all of those things put together make it, and I'm not trying to, blow you up here, but I mean, I do recognize what you bring to the table, and that's why I'm sending people your way who are interested in buying notes, selling notes, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, and it's fun, and there's not really a lot of people who do what I do, so there's really no competition out there. But that being said, are you pivoting at all?
Yes. So based on the current disruption, for sure. As I have been investing, I've become more and more of what I'll call an armchair investor, right? So I'm doing more stuff just from the comfort of my home, comfort from my office. And especially during this disruption, I've amped that up even more, which is fantastic because that means I'm doing fewer minimum wage activities like, driving, in some cases going to see properties. It's like we have so much awesome technology today. It's like, I can tell my contractor, shoot me a video, right, of what you've done. So, it's like, I don't even have to leave, right, to go and make sure that you get paid. And I can even ask the seller to do that. When we first started investing, like sending a picture file, it was like, all right, I'll see you in about 3 years, right? But now it's something completely different. So
you could do a video walkthrough live with your contractor if you wanted to.
The only thing the phone can't pick up is the smell. But if it has a bad smell, that's the smell of money sometimes too, right? So, but yeah, so that has been, so I've been doing more what I'll call armchair investing, right? So I have more investors bringing me more deals. So networking is still going on, from my perspective. And then more obviously cold calling is what we're doing. So we're transitioning away from, our kind of army of door knockers is now our army of cold callers. But other than that, I mean, to be honest with you, because we have such a V-shaped recovery. So the March sales data was 2020 versus 2019 was on point, was March 2020 beat March 2019. In April and May, it was down 20% and 23% respectively. But in June and July, it's back up, 20 and 25%. So year to date, sales in Texas are up almost 2% year over year in the middle of something that we have never lived through before. And, part of it is because we were already in the middle of a disruption when this disruption hit, which is we had no inventory. Now we took that very little inventory and we have even less, because unlike what we experienced in 2008, where sellers were putting all their properties on the market because they were speculative purchases, they had bought more than what they needed, more than one, right? And they rushed into the market. Buyers kind of moved out because lenders weren't lending. In this market and this disruption, sellers have pulled out. Buyers are rushing in because interest rates were 6%, for example, in 2008. Now they're 3% or less. And sellers have pulled out because it's like, man, I don't know about you, but like, I'm in the comfort of my home right now. If a realtor called me and said, hey, I need to show your house today,
I'm not getting out.
Oh man, I'm on a Zoom meeting. I've got my son in the other room. He's on his Zoom. He's 11. He's in school. He's on his Zoom. I can't show
this house right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't know where you've been, not you, the buyer. So it's like,
I don't really want you walking through my house.
So there's about a 25% decrease in the number of listings that are on the market today. So
in your crystal ball, what do you see for Austin?
So again, I'm sorry.
In your crystal ball, what do you see for Austin coming up in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, it's funny what I say every time I give a market update is I know more about what's going to happen in the next 3 years than I know about what's going to happen in the next 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, right? I know what's going to happen in the next, few months in terms of closed sales. But like yesterday, for example, HUD came out and extended the foreclosure moratorium, right? So that was not necessarily in my crystal ball. I thought, hey, gave everybody time. And in Austin, the unemployment rate is only at 6%. It was at 2.5% before, but I thought this market had kind of basically moved on. Now I am in my little bubble over here for sure, but no, the market looks strong for Austin. The market looks strong for Texas. People keep moving here because we're business friendly, right?
Right.
And people are moving out of other states to come here because even though prices have gone up substantially, we're still affordable versus the rest of the country, and the quality of life here and cost of living here are really fantastic. So my expectation is, even though we saw the 20% decrease for 2 months, and now we're at 20% decrease for the post 2 months, I think we're going to kind of start to level out, but those prices are going to continue to go up as sellers continue to keep their houses off the market, as they're unsure, as they're working from home and can't just get up and leave a Zoom meeting and then bring their kids, right, to leave the Zoom meeting on top of that. And all this other stuff is going on. So I think those prices are still going to go up. The builders can't keep up. The builders have not been able to keep up for almost the last 8 years, right? We've been in a housing shortage in Austin, and probably 6 to 7 years in Dallas. So this is a very, and I know I sound like I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid over here, but man, I've seen into the future, right? And it looks pretty good. And for me, and I think that's a great question, because
and when it gets to, and you've talked about retail, right? What about your owner finance criteria? Have you gotten stricter on your owner finance criteria when you're looking at a prospective borrower?
Well, that changed a lot post some of the Dodd-Frank regulation, right?
Of course.
For all of us.
Yeah.
But, for me, I just asked 2 very basic and simple questions. How much do you have to put down, and how much can you afford a month, right? What are you paying right now in your current rent? Those are, with 90% accuracy, pretty indicative of what's going to happen with a buyer,
Are you now asking, what because obviously if it's a dishwasher and I'm not saying this is your target audience, but if it's a dishwasher in a restaurant compared to an industry, construction, say, where that person's job is secure, or they could go out and get another one. Obviously, bartender versus a guy, digging holes on a construction site, you're going to want to go with the construction site. Is any of this playing into it?
I would say that more of our borrowers are of the construction type, group. I gotta kind of be delicate as I, say these things, but a lot of these borrowers were not born in the United States, right? But they came here and they worked their tails off doing jobs that I don't want to do. I don't know about you, right?
Right.
And they have a lot of mattress money, but they have no credit, right? And
they never have, and they don't trust banks, and they don't want to go there.
Right. And I don't, it's like, and I can come up with a solution for that, right? As well as can you, right? And banks can't. So that is that niche where there's a lot of opportunity. And what I love about that group of people is a lot of times it's multi-generational, right? So you have the, grandmother who's there cooking all day, right? So they don't have a whole lot of eating out expenses. You have parents that are, working. Sometimes you have siblings or cousins in there too. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be really a surprise, them not being able to come up with the payment, and they are, continue to save all that mattress money. And this is their only shot. What we do is really, in some cases, their only shot of living the American dream and what they came here to do.
So you're still looking at it. I mean, still looking at it with the same lens, going, all right, this is what rent is. If they've been making this rental payment for the last 2 years, there's no reasonable expectation that they're going to have to stop doing that. Because as you pointed out, a lot of this demographic, depending on where you're creating owner finance notes, will combine households if need be, just to keep that roof over your head.
Yeah. So I think, so I want to back up something that I said about the market and how good it looks. And I think, the macro market looks strong. But I do think that, as always, some of the FHA, VA, USDA loans, where the borrowers only have to put down, 3.5% to be able to get in, for a lot of those people, one little blip, which we've seen, right?
Which we've seen,
which we're living through right now. One little blip can throw them completely off, and many of them won't be able to get back on track. So I think that there are going to be a ton of owner finance opportunities for those homeowners who, literally just got 1 month behind, and then it just, spiraled out of control. And those are the people, and those are the people that I can be of assistance to.
Right.
For
But
sure.
and there is a domino effect, which is what we saw back in 2008, because once you have a certain percentage of foreclosures in the market, and I'm starting to see it in certain Dallas neighborhoods where we'll drive and there'll be for sale sign, for sale sign, for sale sign.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we saw 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So when you're driving and you're looking at that, once you hit a certain number of foreclosures that are being sold way below value, well, that average homeowner who's really done everything right and is, maybe they haven't lost their job, but they've got to sell for whatever reason. They're moving, they need to downsize. Possibly they've lost their job and they're like, okay, well, I can do this for 6 months, but what if I don't get something else?
Yeah.
They then have to lower their asking price to kind of meet it there, and they might not be able to write that check at closing.
That's right. And that's where we come in with specialized knowledge. And I think you pointed out exactly right. I mean, these are, you'll see neighborhoods on the foreclosure list, and it's like, once you see 2 or 3 houses in the same neighborhood, it's like, that's going to be the next hotspot.
Exactly.
You can go to town with this strategy.
No, absolutely. And, when you're looking at this, it might, it creeps up there ever so slowly. And then all of a sudden it just kind of takes over. Yeah. And then anybody who needs to sell is there. And then you're seeing even prices creep down from there.
Yeah, I'll never forget this one neighborhood that was in this community outside of Austin. It was called Del Valle, so it's close to the airport. And it was a KB home community. And exactly what you said happened. And it was, people were, the builder was actively selling new homes for, at that time. So going to go back in the time machine, 2008, 2009, 2010, they were actively selling homes for $200,000, but the HUD foreclosures were actively, reselling those homes that were only like 1 to 3 years old for $70,000, $80,000, $100,000.
And why would somebody come in and, okay, yeah, it's barely lived in. Right. The wrapper's been off, months.
But I saw people who would go and take those new houses, and listen, it works out, right? As long as you don't have a decrease in income or an increase in expenses, and as long as you can hold on to the next market cycle. But literally, like, there were people in the neighborhood that were protesting, like the owners, like, and my heart broke for them. But it's like, I can do my job, which is bring specialized knowledge into this community to be able to save people's, credit, and to be able to find the next, borrower or buyer who can't necessarily get a normal loan, but has the cash to be able to stitch this back together, whereas it otherwise would not be by the, the system as it stands today that focuses on that 80%, right? right? So, yeah, it's a very powerful niche, and we have the opportunity to save lives, literally. I mean,
Yes.
And it's something I take very seriously, that, our impact on someone's financial life and the life of their children, right? I mean, think about that. You go through foreclosure, you can't hardly even rent an apartment. You can't buy a car at a good interest rate. You're paying these high interest rates for at least the next 7 years. That means you're always going to be set back. You're always going to be at, below sort of that zero level. And that is something that doesn't just affect, the parents, but it's also something that affects the children as they go to different schools, as they have to make other sacrifices. So, I mean, I very much see what I do, what you do, is kind of having a really big, impact financially and socially for these families
yeah, and so I'm kind of on, I'm kind of that secondary tier where I'm going in, and I'm buying these loans that have been created, even if it's picked up subject to and then wrapped to another buyer, I'm buying those. Everybody is, I'm probably on a daily basis, I'm getting emails, texts, calls. Okay, has your criteria changed? I am this close to going from an 80% loan to value down to a 75% loan to value, just to hedge my bet on the future. But the one thing that has changed from my institutional buyers used to be a sub 500, just wouldn't fly at all. Right now, it's kind of a sub 550 or even a sub 600. So, when I'm looking at loans, yeah, I'm pulling credit, to kind of see where they're at right now. What, how risky is their makeup of being able to repay on those loans? And, as long as, gosh, they've got somewhere in that 550 to 600, I can probably go for it and buy that loan. But and it varies. People are always surprised to learn, that these first generation Americans who are buying these homes, who might be in a construction site or might be, cleaning hotel rooms, all of that, a lot of them have 650, 700, 750 credit scores because they've been on time paying their mortgage for the last 12 to 24 months. And it's been reported to whatever credit bureau. So whereas 2 years ago they didn't have any credit, now they do. So, but I'm assuming, I don't know, you obviously are pulling credit through an RMLO when you're setting up your borrowers. Do you have a credit limit right there that you're looking at, or no?
I don't, because unlike you, I'm not, looking to resell that, right? So,
right away.
So that's, again, part of your niche, right? So, for me, I'm just looking, I'm looking for one of two things, kind of a short-term score, if you will, which is for my tribal knowledge, get to take a part of the buyer's down payment. So that's the number one, me getting in and out of that transaction very quickly. The other, way that I can do this is if I'm buying and if there is some equity. So for example, if I'm buying at 200, I'm reselling at 250, and let's say my buyer has $20K to put down, then I'm putting them in a $230,000 loan. So I'm getting a part of that $20K that they initially put down after reinstatement, after closing costs, after any money to the seller. Then I'm also getting that spread on that 200 to that 230, so that dollar amount spread, and then on top of that, maybe an interest rate spread. And then at the time, so I'm getting that check, and then at the time that they go to refinance, then I'm getting that kind of final big back end, right?
Right.
But I would say for most of mine, I am more in and out because,
So for most of these, you're really marrying a property that's impossible to sell with a buyer who's impossible to lend to, and then you're gone.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. And that's totally fair.
And I mean, if there's a lot of equity, then I'm gonna insert myself, but it has to be worth it to me. So, for me, I don't want to chase a $50 or $100 mortgage payment.
Mortgage payment to then be on the hook.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, I'd rather just go on to the next deal. That's where I find my joy. And that's where I don't have to do, kind of, what I would call kind of the minimum wage activities, or, even not having the loan servicer do that for me. It's like, I want to get back involved if the buyer has a problem and can't continue to make payments. Then I can come in and then do, right by the seller and find a new buyer, right? We can do a deed in lieu of foreclosure. We can do a loan modification. We can do a short sale up to the amount of that original loan, right? But then I can go out and find a brand new buyer and get a part of that down payment and then set the seller up and set the buyer up for success. But I'm more going to be in and out. That's my preference.
Okay. What and just curious, what percentage of the down payment do you typically take?
I want as much as possible.
Of course,
that's number one, and we all do, right? And I find that buyers are always, especially these buyers, are always sandbagging, right? So they always have a lot more than what they say that they have. And that's just what they have, with them. How about the other person that they're bringing to the table as well? But usually, what we find is that these down payments are anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. And I get a lot of buyers who call and say, I've got $5,000. What can you do for me? And I'm like, well, I can suggest you sell your truck and your boat, and then I can suggest you call me back, right, when you're done, right? Hey, did you know that gold's trading for $2,000 an ounce? Go sell something and call me back. But usually, again, for us, typically we're seeing $10,000 to $20,000. And if I can make it work, then I will. If I can't, then I'll just again tell them go sell something and call me back, which is a fun thing to be able to do to somebody. And then sometimes miraculously there's more cash. But we've had a few what I'll call Christmas miracles in the past where we've had a buyer with $50,000 to put down. But for the most part, I'm only seeing 10 to 20. What are you seeing on your end?
Oh, for down payment percentage? Yeah, typically, 10% is the absolute minimum, but I tell anybody to take, and I've got people who come in and they've taken 2 or 3% down, which is utterly ridiculous. And I'm like, no, that's, that is just taking somebody with a pulse. Okay. That's called a renter. Okay. Because they need to rent something and you're letting them in to buy a house for less than last month's and current month's rent, which is,
and your cost to foreclose on them if you have to, right?
Right, absolutely. And I said, so that's ridiculous. We don't do that, right? You're looking for a minimum 10%. And I said, you'd be surprised at how many of these people have 20% down. And when you're talking to new real estate investors, they can't get that into their head. Why? Because they're living on, a can of beans and some ramen. And they can't fathom that this person who barely speaks any English, who's first generation here, American, and they maybe even immigrated here, cannot fathom that they might have $10,000 or $20,000 stuffed under their mattress and then show up with it in a freaking little, paper sack.
Yeah, all day long.
And I've seen it time and time again. And I was guilty of it too. And I first got started.
Me too. And, I remember kind of going, through this literally like saying, well, who in the world would, first off, had to go through the, why would a seller do this? And then why would a buyer do this? And then literally, had to divorce myself from my current situation. It's like, as a seller, I wouldn't do this. Right. And I tell people all the time who are my left brainers, who have a lot of money, who have great credit. And they'll say, I never do this. Yes. No, I know. I'm never going to buy your house. Don't worry. I'm not even going to try. For me, and I had to kind of say, okay, Shenoah, these are not you, right? But I have I have taught this strategy so often, and I know, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but I want to share with you something that has really kind of hit me in my heart in terms of, yes, we're doing so much good out there. It's literally every time we teach this strategy, someone will come up to me and say, oh my gosh, Shenoah, in 2008, I went through a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, or in 2015, I went through a divorce and a foreclosure. If someone like you would have come to me and said, hey, here's what you can do instead of going to foreclosure, oh my gosh, it would have been a godsend for me.
Right. No, and it is. It's one of these things that...
And I'm like, I stopped thinking the way I'm thinking, which is like a self-limiting belief, right? That everyone's like me. And then, for the investor, to your point, they have to stop thinking like they're thinking, which is a self-limiting belief that somebody doesn't have $20,000 just laying around cash. Let go of these self-limiting beliefs and put these magical people together.
Correct. Hey, we just have a few minutes left, and I really want to hear about your blueprint.
Yeah. So I'll show it really quickly, just so you guys can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. And this is something that my husband and I created. So you can tell we're left brain people.
I'm looking at how much is on there.
My husband was a double major electrical engineering and computer science, and I have my MBA. So this little chart goes through the 273 different
chart
we have learned about real estate investing since we started back in 2003. So for our business, this is really kind of the breakdown and the blueprint for our business. So we talk about the different strategies, right, that you can use as a real estate investor. We talk about all the different marketing strategies that you can use. We talk about the sales and negotiation, what I call the exactly what to say for the real estate investor, the analysis and due diligence, right? Nobody's going to spend your money like you are. So you need to understand how to evaluate deals, the financing of those deals, and of course, at the end of the day, how to run your business like a business, right? To stop swinging a hammer in your own business. I like to wear shoes like you like to wear, right?
Like these fabulous.
Yes, I saw those, and it's like those will look good on a job site, right? But man, I don't like to swing my own hammer. When I first got started, I did some minimum wage activities. The faster that I shed those, the faster my business was able to grow. And I think a lot of investors, as they're getting started, get a little hung up on these minimum wage activities and just can't scale their business, right? So it's like, put on one of these, Louboutin shoes, right? And you won't go to the job site, right? And then let me tell you how that will make.
I'm so going to my job site after this. I am, and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put it on Facebook Live just so you can see me walking around my job site, checking things out in these shoes. But no, but you're right, and I tell people nonstop, if you can break down an activity that you're doing in 5 steps or less and write them down, that should go to a virtual assistant. And I mean, I have virtual assistants that work all over the world. The best ones are the ones that are literally about 12 hours different. So I will send them a task while I'm working in the middle of the day. I'll go to bed and wake up the next morning and it's in my inbox and it's done.
Love it.
And again, what's the cost to do that? In some cases, about $3 an hour. Yeah. And so you got to ask yourself, what are you worth? What's your time worth?
And to stay in integrity in those places, $3 or $4 an hour, they literally live like a king.
In some of these countries, some of these places where I'm paying $3 an hour, the average wage is $2 a week.
Yeah.
So when they're able to make that kind of money, from me working from home, I tend to like to employ women in Taliban-ridden countries, because they can't leave their house. They can't go get a job. They can't employ themselves in any respectable fashion. So when you're paying $3 a week or $3 an hour, yeah, it's a godsend for them. So yeah, if you can break down any activity that you have in 5 steps or less, then you need to outsource that, because I guarantee you, I know I make more than $3 an hour. Well, not every day. Some days, some days I don't, but some days I don't count those days. I'm like, oh my God, did I lose money from just waking up and breathing today? That sucked. So, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah.
And your blueprint is amazing. And so if people wanted to come and take your coaching, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so one of the things we do is we do a personalized blueprint for every single person that we talk to. So we've been helping members of our investor association for the last 10 plus years create that. So if you guys want to go out to REIA, REIA, don't forget the A, REIAblueprint.com, we'll just ask you about 30 seconds worth of questions. And these are very pointed questions to figure out your level of expertise, your level of knowledge, what you've done in the past in terms of investing and what your goals are. And then we'll build you a several page business plan based on our knowledge of working with new investors and even experienced investors who are looking to scale their business. So head on over to REIAblueprint.com and we'll get that going for you. We'll send you an email with all the details. And then we'll also invite you to a 3-day class. So as part of our investor association, we realize that you can't get all the information that you need just from an hour-long interview. Sometimes you need a little bit more. So we do a full 3-day class, and we do them pretty regularly to be of service to the members of our association. So heading over to REIA Blueprint, we'll get that done for you. So thank you, Kristin, so much for having me. It was really a pleasure and always good to see you virtually or otherwise.
You too. Wonderful. Thank you very much for tuning in today to Passing Notes. If you want to get a hold of Shenoah Groves, again, REIA, don't forget the A, blueprint.com. She is obviously fabulous and has been doing this for so many years. You can reach me, Kristin Gerst, from Capricorn Mortgage Investments at Kristin at CapricornMortgageInvestments.com. If you have any questions, if you would like to talk about note education, just let me know.